Okay, let's get this party started. We are going to go through and get our usual Saturday mock draft going now. I will apologize. There are a couple things I need to say sorry for. I know we're streaming pretty damn early. I mean, it's 10 a.m. now East Coast, but that's like 7 a.m. on the West Coast. So I'm sorry if you're someone in California, someone over there in the wrong time zone, and you were unable to participate in this live stream. And also, I need to apologize that next Saturday I will be skiing. So we're probably going to be a little bit late on next Saturday's live stream, and it's probably going to instead be, I don't want to give any concrete promises, but probably about next Monday. And yeah, this is going to be the last time you see me until, I want to say Monday. I'm not going to do anything for the Super Bowl. I'm so sorry, but I'm going to be flying all day, and then I'm going to want to watch the Super Bowl rather than just stream. So not going to be streaming tomorrow, but nonetheless, going to be super happy to go through, get this live stream going, get this mock draft going. This is going to be a 12-team Superflex PPR league, and I am not getting the link out there in the general chat. We already filled this on Patreon. I sent the Patreon link out probably 15 seconds ago, and everybody hopped in here. So I think that should be enough for an intro. For the love of God, if you have not done so already, go down there, drop a like on this live stream. Let's get this live stream. I know we're not going to be able to do it live. I know we only got probably about 50 people coming in right now, but when this turns to a video later, let's get it over 500 likes. Come on, we can easily do that. And let's start this draft. 12-team Superflex tight end premium. 12-team Superflex tight end premium. Let's get that out there so everybody knows right now. And we are not having to include the kickers as rookie picks. Instead, we are going to be including the actual rookies in this draft. So you're going to get to see where Treylon Burks, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, where these guys are actually valued. Okay, so we got Mahomes, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert. In my opinion, honestly, I think that's what we should be doing at this point in 12-team Superflex leagues. Looking at the value that you can find on running back a little bit later on, these quarterbacks, when they have such a high floor ceiling combination, not only over the short term, but as well, you know these are going to be core assets for you for a very long time. I'm completely fine with people pushing up this elite tier of quarterbacks before any other position because, I mean, this is just a change of the guard at the quarterback position in the NFL. I know that we used to think that with Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston, way back 2015. I mean, in 2014, we had a lot of disappointing quarterbacks coming in like Blake Bortles, but at this point, I think that if you want to take Burrow, Herbert, Allen, Mahomes, we have seen more than enough from them to be willing to take them over someone like Jonathan Taylor, even though you can't fault someone either for taking Taylor. Now, I know a lot of people are just going to be screaming Justin Jefferson, Justin Jefferson, Justin Jefferson with this selection. And I mean, y'all know that last year I was laughing at people for taking Jamar Chase at the end of the first, the beginning of second of startup drafts. I was saying I wanted CeeDee Lamb. I was saying that you couldn't take him over Justin Jefferson either, despite Jamar Chase being a better prospect. Justin Jefferson had already hit at the NFL level, so we were going to be having our priors higher on Justin Jefferson. I was also advising people to take Najee Harris, Trey Lance, those type of players over Jamar Chase as well. And clearly, I look like a straight-up clown, and I am willing to just go through and say, hell, I was wrong. Best rookie wide receiver season of all time. I know a lot of people want to say, no, Mason, you idiot. It's Randy Moss, yada, yada, yada. You can make the argument for either, okay? Let me pull this up. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but if you're looking at Randy Moss's beginning of his NFL career, he goes out there, 124 targets, 1,300 receiving yards. And if you look at Jamar Chase, I mean, Jamar Chase is right there. Let's pull this up. And this is not to mention, of course, what Jamar Chase has done in the playoffs, which has been incredibly impressive, but I don't want to give him credit for that. I mean, with Jamar Chase, 1,455 receiving yards compared to Randy Moss sitting there his rookie season at 13-13. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, Mason, Jamar Chase played an extra game. Yes, that is true. If we change it to a per game standpoint, Jamar Chase, 85.6 receiving yards. And then if you're looking at Randy Moss, 82.1. I'm not going to just go and make this entire argument about who had the better rookie season. The point is, Ja'Marr Chase was right there with Randy Moss as the best rookie wide receiver season of all time. I have to sit here. I have to take my L. We have to take Ja'Marr Chase at the 107. The other players I would have considered in this range would be guys like Jefferson, Lamar Jackson, Najee Harris, DeAndre Swift. I think all these players are fine selections in this range. Now, with Lamar Jackson, I could easily see the argument, but I'm a little more hesitant to say that Lamar's going to have the longevity at the position that you would see from some of these other quarterbacks that are more centered around being pocket passing options. Someone like Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. I'm a lot more confident with their points per game 3 years from now than I'm going to be with someone like Lamar Jackson, although Lamar Jackson is young. Of course, Lamar Jackson, a very young quarterback still. I mean, at 25 years old, I don't want to say that Lamar Jackson's going to have the longevity of a running back. I'm not saying that at all, but I don't think he's going to be Tom Brady. I don't think he's going to be Aaron Rodgers, and I don't think it's controversial to say that. And with our running backs, we're worried about that 27, 28-year-old cliff. Not necessarily worried about that exact mark with Lamar Jackson, but I don't necessarily think Lamar Jackson's dynasty value is going to hold up over the next 3 years as what you would have with some of those other options like Kyler Murray. If Kyler Murray fell to us at the 107, I'd be completely fine taking Kyler there. Okay, let me give some shout out to everybody out in the live stream real quick. We got Baby Dragon, Tyler, Cody, Bradley, Astros, Red Recliner, and Ryan all out here very, very early. Okay, so Tyler says Waddle's wide receiver 4 on KTC. That's crazy. I'm assuming KTC, is that Kentucky? I think, let me look it up. Oh, okay. I never really used this, to be honest. I thought you were talking about the Kentucky high stakes drafts in a redraft league. I was going to say, hell yeah, if he is a wide receiver 4, I don't really use KTC. I'm not going to lie. I don't think I've ever really looked at it. Okay, so CMC goes off the board at the 205. Okay, so if we're pulling up my dynasty rankings at this point, let's just go best player available by position. Quarterback, honestly, nobody's interesting in this range for me. Running back, pivoting over, we have a lot of these older options. If we were looking at younger players, I'd be interested in guys like Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins, Breece Hall, way down the ADP list. Pivoting over to wide receiver, I think we're just going to maybe double tap the position. We could easily go with Mark Andrews, given the tight end premium format. With Mark Andrews, this is a player only 26 years old. I mean, I think you can make the argument for either option. I'm going to reach on our guy, though. I have him as my wide receiver 3 in Dynasty. I think that with A.J. Brown, clearly this is an option that was disappointing this past season if you're looking at injuries or even if you're looking at a points per game mark. But if you go back just to his sophomore year, to his freshman year, A.J. Brown was one of the most impressive wide receivers in the NFL from an efficiency standpoint. And if you ever get him in an offense that's going to skew a little bit more pass happy, I do think A.J. Brown is one of those players that has the upside to be the wide receiver 1 overall. Now, of course, it's not likely, but it's at least in the range of outcomes. Okay, French Toast coming out says Mark Andrews is tight end 1. Y'all know I was also someone clowning on people for having Kyle Pitts as their dynasty tight end 1 last offseason a little too early. I mean, we were drafting guys like Najee Harris, Trey Lance over Kyle Pitts. I mean, very similar to Ja'Marr Chase. I have to disagree with you here. With Kyle Pitts, he went out there. Not only was he the best rookie tight end prospect of all time, which I was hesitant to then all of a sudden put him at tight end 1 just because his prospect profile, because we know that historical hit rates with rookie tight ends aren't great at all. And we wanted to believe that we could get Kyle Pitts at a discount the following offseason. And Kyle Pitts went out there and put up one of the best rookie tight end seasons of all time, even if you're looking at a per game basis. Now, he did that, and his price point hasn't really increased from where it was at the end of last offseason. And for that reason, I went from someone being way lower in redraft and in Dynasty on Kyle Pitts than everybody else to, I can tell you, if you look at the volume that he had in Atlanta last season, I'm going to be all over Kyle Pitts this offseason. So I understand the argument to have Mark Andrews as tight end 1 based on the production that we just saw. And I have Mark Andrews and Kyle Pitts in the same tier in our dynasty rankings. Personally, I'm going to have Kyle Pitts over him. Mark Andrews at the 210 is a fantastic selection as well. Cooper Kupp at the 207. You can make a strong argument that given how Cooper Kupp may age at the wide receiver position, and historically age really doesn't matter too much at that position, that Cooper Kupp should have been our selection over A.J. Brown. I really I mean, think that there's not that much of a difference between these wide receivers. If you pull up our dynasty rankings at the wide receiver position, we are going to have in tier 2, of course, tier 1, just Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson sitting there by themselves. But tier 2, we have A.J. Brown, Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, all sitting there together. And I think the reason that we decided to go A.J. Brown here over these other veteran wide receivers is if you look at the fact that we started this team off with Jamar Chase, if all of a sudden we believe that the values later on in this draft are guys like Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks, we can kind of keep the flexibility of maybe having this turn into a productive struggle team halfway through. Whereas if we take Cooper Kupp in the second round, all of a sudden I'm going to feel the need to possibly structure this roster as one that has to be competitive, and maybe we end up reaching on someone like Austin Eckler in the fourth. If I don't think that's the best value, I don't necessarily want to have to do that. So with this A.J. Brown selection, we still keep the flexibility of maybe creating a long-term build, but at the same time, we could, if we want to, just go through and push to win now. So I think that if you wanted to make the argument to take a ton of different wide receivers at this 206 pick, I'm not really going to be sitting here and crying about it. But Matthew Stafford goes at the 301. We've seen Matthew Stafford, I swear to God, every mock draft we do at this point. I mean, Matthew Stafford was a fantastic value when we started these a couple months ago. But now, if you're looking at him, every single mock draft he goes at the 2-3 turn. I think it seems like every team always stacks Mahomes and Stafford. I don't know if Yield Fates always grabs this 101 over there on Patreon and he just pencils in Matthew Stafford, or if these are different teams. That would be interesting to go and check out. Matt B says, Mason doesn't know what he's talking about. 100%. That's probably the smartest thing that's been said in this chat yet. Thank you for watching the channel, my friend. Genuinely appreciate it. Okay, so a Rice Cake Randy says, out of context of this mock, do you think Pickens should still have consideration as the top wide receiver in this class as long as he clears medical and test as expected? I think it's a fair argument. I don't think it's a fair argument. Now, with George Pickens, I understand the hype train, and I'm not telling people to slow it down unless people all of a sudden begin to say that he's the wide receiver one. Now, with George Pickens, 5-star prospect, going to Georgia, seen as one of the best wide receivers in the country at 18 years old at Georgia. I mean, goes out there, he's the wide receiver one on that field, and that's incredibly impressive for a team that's loaded up with only 4 or 5-star wide receiver prospects. So if you're looking at that kind of dominance that early, you have to take note, and it definitely puts George Pickens in almost an elite range. However, I actually was arguing with someone over there on Patreon about this yesterday. Even if he clears medical, you are projecting so much on George Pickens. You are projecting that he could have gone out there in his true junior season if it wasn't for the injury, just dominated as you saw with Treylon Burks, as you saw with Drake London. It's a massive projection, whereas with those other top tier wide receivers in Garrett Wilson, in Treylon Burks, and with Drake London, they have complete profiles where you don't necessarily have any question marks around them. You've seen them check every single box. So I can't necessarily ever go through and look at someone like George Pickens and say, you know what, he cleared medical. Look at the upside that he had, and he dominated at an early age in a top conference. I mean, one of the best schools in the country. I understand the excitement behind it, but we can't just take that excitement, take that small window that we have, and just completely override what we have with pretty much every other player. Okay. So now let's go through and get our next pick up here. Okay, so I think that we have some intriguing running backs we could go to. If we are looking at our wide receivers, I know most people are going to have Deebo Samuel as the best option available. Personally, I'm not going to. And our tight end that we would want, we can easily get later in this draft. So my best wide receiver on the board, even in Dynasty, I understand with the age, but Devontae Adams just has such a high floor ceiling combination that I'm going to be fine with it. But instead, I think we're actually going to pivot over to the running back position and surprise some people here. If you're looking at our rankings, I have J.K. Dobbins ranked as our running back 7 in Dynasty. I mean, if we're looking at J.K. Dobbins, this is an option that checked pretty much every single box coming out of Ohio State in that 2020 draft class. He flashed and was one of the most efficient, I know that he led the NFL in yards per carry his rookie season. In reality, that doesn't matter too much because you have to think about the context of that Baltimore Ravens offense. I mean, when you have Lamar Jackson, inherently those running backs are going to be just generating so many more yards on a per touch basis because opposing linebackers can't focus in. I mean, compare that to Alvin Kamara with Drew Brees. I mean, if Drew Brees goes to hand it off to Alvin Kamara, there are one of two options: play action pass or Alvin Kamara is running the ball. And that's what the linebackers have to keep in mind. Whereas in Baltimore, it's a little bit of a different story where obviously you have Lamar Jackson. He's able to bounce it off the side. And I mean, that really freezes linebackers and they're not able to crash in on those running backs, whether that's J.K. Dobbins or Gus Edwards. So the efficiency marks with J.K. Dobbins are definitely going to be a little bit skewed based on what we have just with the overall offense. And there's also one other concern that with him playing alongside Lamar Jackson, he's probably not going to get targeted out of the backfield at a heavy rate because we've seen before with those rushing quarterbacks, whether it's Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Taysom Hill, that those guys generally don't check the ball down out of the backfield nearly as often as what you would see with some pocket passing options going right back to someone like Drew Brees. So there are a lot of different things going on with J.K. Dobbins in the situation that he has in Baltimore. But if we just take that step back, if we go back to that prospect profile coming out of Ohio State, checked damn near every single box, has elite speed, has the size to be a 3-down player, can catch the ball out of the backfield if that's something he is asked to do. He has the team investment as well. He tore that ACL before the season started, so I'm not worried about him maybe having that linger into this upcoming year, say, as we would be with someone like Chris Godwin. So we are going to take J.K. Dobbins here. Okay. So Steven says there's not much tight end talent this year. Lots and lots of running backs that have a shot to hit, though. I will say, I think some people are underrating some of the tight ends in this draft class. Now, not going to lie, I said we were going skiing at the beginning of this live stream. I have recorded every video that's going to come out over the next week for this channel is already recorded. So I kind of know what y'all are going to be watching like 6 days from now. And I have a video coming out talking about some rookies that are going very late in rookie drafts right now that I don't even see on the radar in the top 2 rounds of most mock drafts. And I think that we should be just giving them some mind. I mean, we got a tight end coming out of Coastal Carolina, tight end coming out of Texas A&M that have decent production profiles. I mean, Jordan Weidemeyer has an insane frame. I believe he's 6'6", like 265 pounds. So I think there are some intriguing tight ends. Definitely not last year, though. You shouldn't be expecting a Kyle Pitts. You shouldn't be expecting a Pat Frymuth in this class. Okay, DK Metcalf falls all the way to the 312. This is where I think DK Metcalf should go. I know most people are just tired of me coming out here and saying DK Metcalf was previously too high. Also love the Antonio Gibson pick. But if we're looking at DK Metcalf, I mean, previously, he was going around the selection that we had A.J. Brown, Cooper Kupp, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill. I mean, DK Metcalf previously in these mock drafts was going in the middle of the second. And in my opinion, that was just blatantly too high, as DK Metcalf is a wide receiver that had a good touchdown rate this past year. I mean, if anything, you are going to be ecstatic if that touchdown rate remains the same and he's able to get to double-digit touchdowns every single year going forward. And we know that's the most volatile statistic in fantasy football. So in reality, we should most likely expect the touchdowns to come down. And he's sitting at wide receiver 30 this past season on a per game basis. So those touchdowns have the possibility of coming down, which anybody who knows anything about math will most likely tell you with volatility and randomness that those touchdowns most likely will. All of a sudden, DK Metcalf is a wide receiver that has to take a massive jump up from last year. And I know every time we say this little asterisk at the end of this analysis with DK Metcalf, this is what everybody and their mom focuses in on. They ignore everything with DK Metcalf, the production that he had last season, and just focus in on, how dare you say Russell Wilson's leaving? How dare? Did you not hear the coaching staff? Of course, at this time of the offseason, every coaching staff's going to say, yeah, that quarterback that we have here, we like him. We want to keep him. What are they gaining by saying Russell Wilson's going to be out of Seattle? There is still the outside chance, it's still in the range of outcomes that he does get a quarterback downgrade as well, even though I'm saying, not necessarily saying it's likely. Okay. So let's go through and let's look for our next selection. I know a lot of people are probably interested to see where Kamara is going to go in this mock draft. I don't think I can touch him here. I mean, we've had some people coming out and telling us that they're getting insane values on Alvin Kamara. We probably need to lower him even further in our overall rankings. And Okay. We shouldn't have been talking so much. Okay. We're going to take Diontae Johnson. Diontae Johnson, a player that, I mean, I was way, way, way too low on. I mean, we liked him his rookie year because you were getting just free NFL draft capital. I mean, he was a third-round wide receiver out of Toledo. This is a wide receiver that, if you remember back in 2019, he was going at the late third, beginning of the fourth of rookie drafts. So, I mean, we were drafting a ton of Diontae Johnson and Terry McLaurin in that draft class, not because I thought they were great wide receivers, but because I was saying, hell, this is what the NFL is telling us and the entire Dynasty community is overlooking it. But the second that Diontae Johnson hits and all of a sudden he's worth an early second and we drafted him at the late third, I'm selling everywhere and making horrible decisions and telling people that Diontae Johnson is overvalued in Dynasty and in redraft leagues. We did that for 2 years in a row, despite Diontae Johnson in back-to-back seasons going out there and commanding essentially double-digit targets every single game. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, his quarterback's Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph's not going to be the quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's not fool ourselves. They're either going to address the position in the NFL draft or possibly go out there and get someone, say, like Jimmy Garoppolo. And I know Jimmy Garoppolo ain't great, but are you going to make the argument that Ben Roethlisberger was better than Jimmy Garoppolo this past season? I think that you can't necessarily do so. And with Diontae Johnson, he was out there as a mid wide receiver one in that same draft class as A.J. Brown, in that same draft class as Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf. And he's been right there, I mean, out targeting every wide receiver. And this past season, out producing every single one at the same time. So I am just going to take my L here. I mean, maybe this is what this live stream should be called: Mason taking his L. Mason taking Jamar Chase in the first round, taking Diontae Johnson in the fourth round, because with Diontae Johnson entering the prime of his NFL career, 25 years old, definitely older than DK, older than A.J. Brown as well. I mean, stayed at Toledo for a very long time, but I'm fine with it in a PPR format. I think if you were looking at him compared to some of the other running backs we would be interested in, some of the other running backs would have included Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, and Travis Etienne. I don't think we would have been taking Derrick Henry here. Okay, so let's pivot over. Okay, so Steven says there's going to be a lot of day 3 running backs in the NFL draft that are useful in fantasy. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think there'll be a lot of day 3 running backs that are going in dynasty drafts in the late second, early third round. And I think what you're hoping for with those running backs, and to be honest, I don't see many profiles that fill this. Of course, the NFL Combine is going to tell us so much. The Combine doesn't really matter for wide receivers. It doesn't really matter for quarterbacks. It does matter for tight ends and running backs. And once we get official sizes, as well as, official 40-yard dash times, I think we'll have a much easier time going through and looking at those deep running back prospects and trying to identify what you're looking for with those day 3 players or those late day 2 guys. I mean, a perfect example is Alexander Madison as a compensatory pick. If you can get that guy that profiles to be an elite handcuff running back, that's best case scenario, in my opinion. If you can get someone that has the size to be a 3-down player that caught balls in college and at the same time, was athletic at the NFL Combine, that checks every single box. A perfect example of this would be going back and looking at someone like David Johnson. With David Johnson here, yes, he ended up going in the 3rd round rather than officially on day 3, but still, you're trying to get those bigger bodied running backs that caught passes in college that are still going to have that athletic profile. You can have size, but to have size and athleticism, that's really what we're looking for. Okay. So let's go through and Steven says, I'd hold Madison on most teams, just doesn't have a great trade value right now. Oh yeah, real quick, for the love of God, don't trade Alexander Madison. Alexander Madison is one of the best assets I think you can currently invest into in Dynasty. Now, Alexander Madison, it's the perfect example of a player you can't go out there and trade straight up for, because if you go up to the Alexander Madison owner, and same thing with any of these fringe roster players, and you say, hey, I'll give you a 3rd for Alexander Madison. A guy's going to tell you F off. Maybe you're not even going to get Alexander Madison for a 2nd round pick, because once you just highlight and spotlight that player and say, hey, think about this guy, all of a sudden the price immediately goes up. This is what we were talking about when I was saying earlier at the very beginning of this offseason to go and trade for someone like Benjamin, because you have Chase Edmonds and James Conner as unrestricted free agents. Whenever I was saying at the very beginning of this offseason, months ago, to go and trade for someone like Keyshawn Vaughn, the analysis there is, while yes, they look like they are the only running backs left on their contracts with this team this upcoming season, if you go and offer a third round pick for those players, the majority of times, I mean, even if that's their market value, you're getting rejected because the owner's going to look at it and say, oh, why the hell am I doing this? Why does this guy want, Benjamin? He's going to pull up real quick. Oh, crap. He's the only running back left in Arizona next year. Of course, they'll probably bring someone in, but nonetheless, that's not the point. The point is if you're acquiring someone like Alexander Madison, you're most likely going to have to do it in a trade where, say, you're going and pivoting from a wide receiver in the same tier. The perfect example of this is, say, going to where I currently have Calvin Ridley ranked. And I know a lot of people have, say, Treylon Burks ranked ahead of Calvin Ridley. You get Treylon Burks in your rookie draft, and Treylon Burks, Calvin Ridley ranked similarly in Dynasty. You go and you approach the Calvin Ridley owner and say, hey, I'll give you Treylon Burks for Calvin Ridley and Alexander Madison. And of course, that's just an example. That's not going to work with every single player, but trying to get that option as a throw-in guy is going to be a lot easier for you than approaching that player for a one-for-one pick swap. Okay, and the reason I love Alexander Madison, and we talked about this in the last mock draft, so I'm going to keep it real brief, is he's the same exact player as Tony Pollard. I mean, they're both premium handcuff running backs. The running back goes down in front of him. All of a sudden, they are top 5 options in fantasy. You can't start either when either Ezekiel Elliott or Dalvin Cook are healthy, even if they do have small roles in their offenses. Can't start them unless those running backs go down. If those running backs go down, they're top 5 guys. Tony Pollard costs double right now what Alexander Madison does. So Alexander Madison's definitely the play. But you have some of these rookie wide receivers going off the board. If you go over to Patreon real quick and you pull up our Dynasty startup rankings, I mean, y'all know previously, okay, real quick. Are y'all just trolling me here? Am I just having to take the guys I don't like? I guess that's what it is. You could convince me that Aaron Rodgers is the pick, given the fact that, like I've said so many times before, we don't care about age at the wide receiver position. He just signed a contract this last offseason. I mean, we've been clowning people for I don't know how long for overdrafting him in Dynasty, overdrafting him in redraft because he's a committee running back. We've always said, when everybody else wanted to make the argument that he was one of the most talented pure rushers in the NFL, our argument was he's the most talented committee running back in the NFL, running behind the best offensive line in football. But that's still the case. Nothing has changed with Nick Chubb. The only difference is you're getting him at a supreme discount. This is someone that was drafted in 2018. Now he's a little bit older because he stayed all 4 years in Georgia because that significant knee injury. But if I'm pulling up where I have Nick Chubb ranked in Dynasty, I have Nick Chubb ranked, one spot ahead of Joe Mixon. We have Nick Chubb and Joe Mixon in the same exact tier. And honestly, this is kind of why, last year, we were telling everybody, draft Joe Mixon over Nick Chubb, draft Joe Mixon over Nick Chubb, draft Joe Mixon over Nick Chubb, whether it was Dynasty or redraft. That was one of our hard points that we hit pretty much every single video and got so much hate on because the ADP was completely flipped. Now I'm looking at it saying, well, the Cincinnati Bengals, they decided not to use Joe Mixon as a pass catching running back, which is one of the reasons we were excited about Joe Mixon with the departure of Giovanni Bernard. And with Joe Mixon, they are the same age. Joe Mixon drafted in 2017, but he came out of OU at only 20 years old compared to Nick Chubb being an old man in his own draft class. But nonetheless, if you look at the contract situations, Joe Mixon going into year 3 of his second deal, Nick Chubb going into year 2. And with Nick Chubb, you're getting him this far behind Joe Mixon, almost an entire round. I've never been a Nick Chubb fan. I've always been that Joe Mixon guy, but at this point we have him ranked in the same exact tier. And I have Nick Chubb ranked ahead of some of these other running backs that went in front of him. I have Nick Chubb ranked ahead of Derrick Henry. I don't really see a difference between Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry, and I don't necessarily see why they're going around apart. Okay, so Montgomery going at the 5'10", Elijah Moore at the 5'09". Caleb says, what pick would you sub for Madison? The thing is, as we were discussing previously, I think that if you're playing in a super flex format, I would love to go and trade a second rounder for Alexander Madison. Of course, you're not going to be trading the 201, the 202, the 203, but say if you're playing in a super flex league, if we can send the 208 for Alexander Madison, that's going to be fantastic. But in reality, that's the deal that you just never see getting done in the offseason. It's the psychology of Dynasty owners. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to take one of those wide receivers and say, hey, I'll give you A.J. Brown and Jalen Waddle. And of course, just pick 2 guys that you have in the same tier and ask for Alexander Madison on top and say, this is the best way to get these deals done. And I know it sounds lame and I know we're not giving exact details, but just hear me out on this. Say you want to acquire a player for a 3rd round rookie pick, whether that's Benjamin, Keyshawn Vaughn, doesn't matter who it is. If you go and approach that owner and say, I'll give you this 3rd round rookie pick for Benjamin, they're not going to accept the 311 for Eno. Very rarely is that going to work. But what could work is if you find 2 wide receivers that you have, pretty much at identical value. As we said, we have A.J. Brown pretty much with all these other wide receivers near the same exact range. And we go, hell, I don't care if we have A.J. Brown or Cooper Kupp. Let me offer A.J. Brown for Cooper Kupp and Eno Benjamin. There's the outside chance that you pick up that running back or Alexander Madison, whoever it may be, for completely free. There's that chance. B, that may just open the door for negotiations where they say, I don't see why I'm adding Alexander Madison on top of this. Then you say, okay, well, will it even it out if I throw in the 210? That's something that I've had more success with. Please let me know if y'all think I'm just being a crazy person and overthinking it. But what may be crazy here is I've yet to take a quarterback. And yes, this is going to be, like I said, a 12-team super flex tight end premium format. And we may end up going with someone that actually, there are 2 players I freaking love in this range. I am in love with one guy that may fall back to us. Okay. And real quick, thank you so much for everybody who's gone down there and dropped the like on the live stream. As I've said, I apologize that we're getting this live stream going way too early. I know the people on the West Coast probably aren't going to be able to make it in here, but thank you for everybody who's gone down there and dropped that like. Okay, so Hawkinson goes to the 604. Love this pick with TJ Hawkinson. I've actually flirted with moving TJ Hawkinson ahead of George Kittle in our dynasty rankings. Now, the reason for this is if you're looking at TJ Hawkinson, an incredibly young tight end, drafted in 2019, through the first 3 years of his NFL career, he's progressed every single year. Over the past 2 seasons, he's been a top 6 tight end on a per game basis in a tight end premium format. And if you're looking at, him at 23 years old, being able to accomplish that, of course, that was last year. Now you have TJ Hawkinson at 24. But nonetheless, if you're looking at him at 23, being able to be a top 6 tight end, then at 24, following that up and proving that consistency in about the worst situation you could ask for, clearly TJ Hawkinson, who was a top 10 pick in that 2019 draft class, has proven that he not only was a great prospect, he's going to be a great player in the NFL as well. And it's also a lot to do with about George Kittle falling down our rankings. Whereas if you're looking at George Kittle, there is the outside chance that just Trey Lance isn't great for him. Now, I'm completely fine with Raymond going and getting this stack of Trey Lance and George Kittle, just doubling down on that one investment. But real quick, we get our guy. Prayers up. Okay, so we have a video coming out. A lot of people on Patreon already know this because we made a post with it, but we have a video explaining why Calvin Ridley is such a good investment in Dynasty Fantasy Football right now. Calvin Ridley going this far behind DJ Moore, this far behind Chris Godwin. And with Calvin Ridley, if you go back to 2020 and you look at his per game numbers and you remove games that he played less than 60% of the snaps, because remember in 2020, there were a couple games that Calvin Ridley left early. If we remove those games, we have a 12-game sample of Calvin Ridley scoring 22 points per game. And if you look at the wide receivers that were able to accomplish 22 points per game over the past 2 years, this is the list. Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill. That is the range that we saw Calvin Ridley scoring in 2020. He was drafted in 2018. Yes, he's a little bit older. I don't know why he got to Alabama at such an old age. One day we should just get around to looking that up. But an incredible receiver if you're looking at the top end production that we last saw from him. And he's 27, stepping into the prime of his career. Who's proven that he's up there with Tyreek Hill while fully healthy. And if you're going to ask me, and by the way, Tyreek Hill's about to be 28. Tyreek Hill's essentially 28. Calvin Ridley turned 27 last month. And if you're going to ask me who will age better at the wide receiver position between the player that wins with the elite athletic profile, the player that wins with that top end speed versus Calvin Ridley, I'm probably betting Calvin Ridley. So we're getting him at the 606 here. I think that's a fantastic selection. I think Calvin Ridley is the best value in Dynasty Fantasy Football right now. If you pull up where I have Calvin Ridley in our wide receiver rankings, I have Ridley as our wide receiver 14. I recently moved him ahead of DJ Moore because I had him ahead of DJ Moore at the beginning of the offseason. Then I let y'all go through and bully me to put DJ Moore higher. And we had to kind of revisit that. We had to see if we were making a mistake. We were making a mistake. So we fixed that ranking. We have Calvin Ridley at wide receiver 14. Players that I have Calvin Ridley ranked ahead of in our Dynasty rankings. I have him ranked ahead of Devonta Smith, Elijah Moore, Terry McLaurin, Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Chris Godwin, DJ Moore. And I believe that's it. No, I haven't ranked ahead of Treylon Burks as well. Like, we have Calvin Ridley ranked right here next to Deontay Johnson. We have Deontay Johnson, wide receiver 10. Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 14. Okay. So Mushu Chicken says, Mason, I just traded the 207 for Alexander Madison the other day in a non-super flex. It can happen. Okay, in a one quarterback format, moving the 207 for Alexander Madison, that is a fantastic selection. We saw it last year. I mean, we've been saying this for years now. Finally, the haters have to kind of keep quiet because it was proven last year that if Dalvin Cook goes down, Alexander Madison, from a volume standpoint, from a production standpoint, top 5 running back in fantasy. And it's projectable as well. Like, it's not something that's like a random spike week like Nyheim Hines that goes for 6 receptions, 80 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. Brendan says, what would a Calvin Ridley trade look like? I mean, this is something that's... I love the Patreon community. Thank you for asking this question, first off. And I had that same exact question because in these mock drafts, Calvin Ridley has been going so damn late. You've seen Calvin Ridley going extremely late as well. And just if you pull up, say, DLF ADP, and I was like, okay, well, obviously there's a difference between mock drafts and real league value. Can we go through and see some recent trades with Calvin Ridley? And my God, we went to the Patreon community. I made a post and I was saying, hey, I'm making a Calvin Ridley video. Can y'all let me know where you've seen Calvin Ridley go in any real drafts? I mean, where you've seen Calvin Ridley go for in any trades in your real leagues, of course, real money leagues. And we had a ton of people reaching out to us on Patreon. Got Calvin Ridley for Chuba Hubbard in the 204. In a recent startup, seen him going anywhere from the 5th to the 7th. 69th overall pick. Got Calvin Ridley for Gabriel Davis, KJ Osborne, KJ Hamler, the 303. 2024 second round pick for Calvin Ridley. Got Ridley and a 2023 for Chase Claypool. Like, ridiculous trades. We go through all of them in a Calvin Ridley video that's coming out in about a week. Like I said, I'm sorry that we're recording those videos so far in advance, but we are going skiing. And I will say real quick, everybody, prayers up for me skiing. Never been skiing before, and I am terrified that I'm going to bust up one of my knees or something. I am scared, to say the least. Okay. So JC says, in Dynasty, there's no chance I'm taking A.J. Brown over Cooper Kupp unless Aaron Rodgers shows up in Tennessee. Completely understand that sentiment. As we discussed earlier in this live stream, if you pull up our Dynasty rankings, we have A.J. Brown, Cooper Kupp ranked back to back. The reason we decided to go A.J. Brown here is because when we take Jamar Chase to the 107, there's still the outside chance that we possibly take this team into a productive struggle mindset. And if that's going to be the case, and that's the value that falls to us later on in the draft, I would prefer having the optionality of possibly going with a competitive win now team or going with that productive struggle build. And I think A.J. Brown gives us that option. Whereas if we take Cooper Kupp in the second round, we essentially lock ourselves in to going win now, which we end up taking a lot of veteran players in this draft anyway. So if we were going back to the second round at this point, it probably would make sense and it probably would make this team better to have Cooper Kupp at the 206 rather than A.J. Brown. But of course, I mean, hindsight is 2020. Okay, Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the 704. So this Elijah Mitchell price point at the 609 is a lot more reasonable than where I've seen him going previously. So at this point, I mean, we're looking for tight ends. We're looking for quarterbacks. Tight ends, I'm honestly probably going to punt the position. I really wanted us to get either TJ Hawkinson or Darren Waller making it back to us at the 606. I wanted one of these three players. We ended up getting our guy Ridley, so it wasn't a big deal. Okay, and I know, real quick, if just in case this ends up happening, and we go the next 4 rounds without taking a tight end or a quarterback, whatever it may be, I don't need to see a lot of keyboard warriors. And of course, I love your criticism, and a lot of the times it's warranted. The comment that you would rather have Cooper Kupp over A.J. Brown in Dynasty, I completely understand that, and I love your opinion there. But for you to tell me, you didn't draft enough quarterbacks, you didn't draft enough tight ends, you drafted too many wide receivers, when it's February 12th and we'd have 200 days until we have to submit a starting lineup, that is just horrendous analysis that I'm not going to hear any of. Okay. So if that's going to be your contribution to this live stream, you just keep it to yourself. All right. And I think we're going to have a reach here. Okay. So if you're looking at our quarterback 17, and this is a player that has risen up rankings a considerable amount, but it's justified in my opinion. Yeah, we are going to reach on him. We're going to take Malik Willis at the 707. Now, with Malik Willis, we previously did not have him ranked as our quarterback 1 in Dynasty. But, I mean, y'all know that our quarterback evaluation, I mean, if you look over the past 4 years, I think we have had a lot of misses. Don't get me wrong. I'm the guy telling you to draft CeeDee Lamb over Jamar Chase last year. I want to say that I'm an idiot. But because I can acknowledge how dumb I am and that I'm an idiot, our quarterback evaluation has been better than anybody else's. And why is that? We listen to what the NFL tells us with draft capital. So when the Dynasty community thinks that Josh Allen's a horrible pick and the NFL doesn't know what they're doing, we're taking Josh Allen. Same thing with Justin Herbert. When the Dynasty community thinks Justin Herbert is a horrendous selection, should have never gone ahead of Tua Tagovailoa, and Justin Herbert's going, behind Tua in every single Dynasty mock draft. Dynasty real rookie draft back in 2020, we're taking Herbert. We listen to what the NFL tells us. We look for rushing upside. So we're drafting Jalen Hurts in the 3rd round of rookie drafts back in 2020, because when that quarterback with rushing upside starts at the NFL level, then you can start them in fantasy. And we're just looking at the situation they land in as well. Because when Trevor Lawrence lands in Jacksonville, when Justin Fields lands in Chicago, you got to knock him down a peg. So Malik Willis, we don't know the landing spot yet. But if you look at how NFL mock drafts are trending, it looks like now Malik Willis is projected to be neck and neck with Kenny Pickett as the first quarterback off the board. Right now, the ADP, if you look at composite mock drafts, which takes every mock draft across the entire internet, not Dynasty mock drafts, but NFL mock drafts, now has Malik Willis as the 14th pick. And if he is going to get the same capital as a lot of those other quarterbacks, as Kenny Pickett and as I don't even want to say it, because he's easily projected to just be with Kenny Pickett. It's only him and Kenny Pickett. Malik Willis is that guy now. You kind of have to take him in this range because he averaged over 100 rushing yards a game his junior season. So I'm going to be fine with it. Very similar to how we were drafting Trey Lance everywhere last offseason. Of course, Malik Willis isn't going to get as good of a landing spot as Trey Lance. He's not going to have the same team investments, and we're not going to value him at the same range. But we know if Trey Lance is starting, you can start him, give him the rushing upside. I think that we have the same thing with Malik Willis here. Yeah, but Matt Corral's not going to go in the same range of the NFL draft. If you were pulling up grinding the mocks right now, last I checked, Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett are literally back to back. But we did not have it ranked that way previously, going back to what I was saying, because if you were looking at mock drafts for the NFL previously, the assumption was Malik Willis was going to be a late 1st round pick, early 2nd round pick, which completely changes everything. If you look historically at quarterbacks in that range, guys like Paxton Lynch and Jordan Love, with how many opportunities that they get to start an NFL game versus quarterbacks that go, closer to the top 10. So if he gets that NFL draft capital, and we know that he is going to have a much better shot to actually go out there and start, I'm going to be a lot more excited about taking Malik Willis at the 707. Ray says, hey Mason, how have I done so far? Okay, let's go through. Check out Ray's team. Completely fine with the Najee Harris selection. I know a lot of people have Najee Harris, DeAndre Swift. Flip-flopped. I have him in the same tier. I think it's really up to you with Najee Harris. Say running back that, of course, not going to be in a great situation. I don't even want to argue that he is a great talent either, but the thing is, you just saw him handle every single snap played. And he's going to be on that rookie contract. I know he's old, but if you're going to be able to play 100% of the snaps and you're going into year 2, I'm fine taking you in the 1st. Trey Lance, I'm never going to argue with the Trey Lance selection at the 203, especially going 1 pick before Jalen Hurts. Okay, please answer me this, everyone. And I hate that I've been pegged as the Jalen Hurts hater now, because for the longest time, I was the fanboy of Jalen Hurts. I was known as the guy that loved Jalen Hurts. Where's the upside at taking him at the 204? Legitimately. How many years does he have to start for that pick to pay off? He simply, in my opinion, does not have the team investment, does not have enough job security to be worth the selection at the 204. I would not be surprised if you have Jalen Hurts. I love Jalen Hurts. He's one of my most owned quarterbacks in Dynasty, just because that 2020 offseason when people are severely undervaluing him. And he will be a top 10 quarterback in fantasy this upcoming season on a per game basis. But how many games are we getting in the long term? I can't get behind this Jalen Hurts selection at the 204. I know people are going to continue to call me a Jalen Hurts hater. You do you, but at the end of the day, and I know the coaching staff is screaming in Philadelphia, Jalen Hurts is our guy, Jalen Hurts is our guy, Jalen Hurts is our guy. There's a big difference between what actually happens and what coaching staff say is going to happen. Okay, so let's pull up our next pick. Okay, so if we're looking quarterbacks, our best player available, I believe, is going to be Zach Wilson. We have Zach Wilson, quarterback 19. We have Malik Willis, quarterback 17. Tua, quarterback 18. Funny how that played out. Running back, yeah, Aaron Jones has to be our best option on the board. 100% Aaron Jones is our best option. Okay, our rankings are glitching out real quick. Okay, we may end up just... Okay, I know a lot of people probably want to see us take Freiermuth. If we were going to go wide receiver, I'd be going Michael Thomas. We're just going to go Zach Wilson. With Zach Wilson, I mean, I've been of the opinion for a very long time, once you saw, I mean, the combination of Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson failing their rookie year, that I was going to go through and I was selling low on these players. But it's kind of funny to see how Trevor Lawrence has relatively maintained that high value point. Same thing with Justin Fields. And Zach Wilson's falling to the 806. So even though we were saying that we were selling low on Zach Wilson, how much lower is Zach Wilson going to go? I mean, if you look historically, those quarterbacks that get selected in the top 3 of the NFL draft, I mean, they have a runway where they are allowed to be Mitchell Trubisky. They're allowed to be Blake Bortles. They're allowed to stink it up for 4 years and still have that starting job. I mean, whereas historically, the quarterback in Justin Fields' range doesn't have that long leash, but nonetheless, you do you. I'm going to do me. We're going to take Zach Wilson to the 806 instead of Justin Fields at the 304. And real quick, just because I see that on the live stream, we almost have 100 likes. So, I probably need to piss some people off here. If we have almost 100 likes in this live stream, that's probably not a good thing for the brand. So let me show y'all something here, because I just want to do this for any of the people that are hate watching this video that saw me go out there and tweet that Mitchell Trubisky had a better rookie season than Justin Fields. And I'm fine if you want to take Justin Fields at a massive discount here. But to take Justin Fields still in this range at the 304, we are ignoring everything. Like, is it an ostrich that takes its head and just buries it in the ground and pretends nothing else is going on? I feel like that's what every Justin Fields, Ohio State, Chicago Bears fanboy is doing. If you look at Mitchell Trubisky, his rookie season. Okay, let's pull this up. 7 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, a 6.1 adjusted yards per pass attempt. This statistic is extremely predictive going forward. I will make an in-depth video talking about this. 6.1 adjusted yards per pass attempt. I'm not even going to go into the fact that Justin Fields went 2-8. That doesn't really matter. But what does matter, 5.8 for his adjusted yards per pass attempt. 7 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. If you look historically, yes, you can find one example. You can find one example of a quarterback that was that poor his rookie season that ended up working out. Josh Allen. And you can tell me, Mason, you know what? I am so confident that Justin Fields is Josh Allen. I'm taking him at the 304. I'm taking him over Cam Akers, Dalvin Cook, J.K. Dobbins. I'm taking him over Deebo Samuel, Devontae Adams, DK Metcalf. Sure. But at the same time, there are a ton of quarterbacks, like guys like Dwayne Haskins, Josh Rosen, that perform that poorly their rookie seasons and never really panned out in the NFL. Now, Zach Wilson falls in that same bucket. But the difference is we are not being overconfident, over arrogant with our selection of Zach Wilson, where instead of taking him over Deebo Samuel, we're taking him over Kadarius Toney. So I've been of the opinion we should be selling those rookie quarterbacks that disappointed. And with Zach Wilson, maybe you can't sell, because what are we getting? You're selling Zach Wilson for Kadarius Toney? Probably not a great idea. But if you're able to go and take Justin Fields and trade him for Deebo, I'm going to do it. And for everybody coming out here and saying Mason, you clown. You still like Trey Lance. Trey Lance didn't start year one. Not saying he's Mahomes. Not saying that in the slightest. Trey Lance will never be anything close to Patrick Mahomes. He can't even dream of that. Of course not. But are those the same people that were saying that when Alex Smith led the Kansas City Chiefs to the playoffs and they didn't have an opportunity to bench him for Patrick Mahomes, Jimmy Garoppolo was 3 points away from making it to the Super Bowl? Realistically, I was wrong, dead wrong when I said Trey Lance would start year one, but I also didn't expect Jimmy Garoppolo to get them 3 points within the Super Bowl. Okay, so Sam Howell goes at the 9:05. Okay, we still have that pulled up on the quarterbacks. I'm sorry about that. Leonard Fournette was someone that was being severely overdrafted earlier this offseason. Leonard Fournette was going, in the 4th round of Dynasty leagues. He was going in the 2nd round of redraft leagues. But at some point, Leonard Fournette's going to represent a value. If Frymuth made it back to us with this pick, I would have been all over Frymuth. You know what? If you pull up our Dynasty rankings, there are 2 players that are veterans, so they actually fit this build with guys like Calvin Ridley, Nick Chubb. And it would look a lot better if we took Cooper Kupp in the 2nd round as well. There are 2 guys that stand out in our rankings. We have Leonard Fournette as running back 27. We still have him ahead of guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire that went significantly before this. And if you're looking at our wide receiver rankings, I know nobody is going to agree with us on this one. Trust me, I get it. We have Michael Thomas as wide receiver 28. I have Michael Thomas as wide receiver 28. The other wide receivers available on the board right now that we have him ahead of Rashad Bateman. We have Rashad Bateman, wide receiver 34. We have Dotson as wide receiver 43. Mike Williams, wide receiver 41. I think we go Michael Thomas. Obviously with Thomas, and this is something we have to address every time we take him because I've been taking him in the 9th round a ton. Yes, there's a good chance we never get anything from Michael Thomas. There's a ton of risk with this selection. However, are we sure? Are we that positive Hunter Renfrow going, 20 picks before him? I'm sorry, not 20 picks before him. 18 picks before him, 16 picks before him, something along those lines. Are we sure we're ever getting anything from Hunter Renfrow going forward? How positive are we that Hunter Renfrow ever has the season to get in the top 12? Whereas we've seen it with Michael Thomas. Going back to 2019, if you want to go back to what we were saying with Calvin Ridley in 2020, puts up 22.5 points per game if you're looking at the games that he actually played in. And if you compare that to wide receivers in the past 3 seasons, only Kupp, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams got there. In 2019, Michael Thomas did as well, and he was the only other player. So if we're getting that discount at the 907, I am easily willing to take the risk that we have that this pick turns into complete dust and is legitimately nothing for the upside chance that maybe Michael Thomas gets away from New Orleans. Maybe New Orleans turns into a horrible organization that all of a sudden is trailing these games from start to finish, and they're flooding Michael Thomas yet again with 12, 13 targets a game. So I'm fine, Michael Thomas at the 907. Actually, I really like this team so far. If I'm going back and looking at any selections I think we messed up, I think you can make an argument that rounds 2, 3, 4, we didn't necessarily take the most optimal player available. But in reality, I feel like every time we selected someone in this range, it's like razor thin. Like if you want to ask me, Mason, J.K. Dobbins or Devontae Adams, I would say personal preference. I would say you do you. And I could easily see me taking Devontae Adams, 50% of the time. If you want to ask me, Mason, A.J. Brown or Cooper Kupp, you do you. It's really your decision. A.J. Brown versus Mark Andrews, you do you, your decision. Like, I don't necessarily think that any of these players stand out as great values or horrible reaches. It's just more so you can make the argument for anybody else in that range so the pick doesn't look great. But outside of that, I feel like we really haven't messed up any given selections here. JC says Matt Nagy couldn't get his veteran quarterbacks to perform. What makes anyone think he'd get a rookie Ohio State quarterback to perform? Oh yeah, no, definitely. Matt Nagy was horrendous. I completely agree with you on that one. But at the same time, are we going to sit here and act like situations are just going to magically change? Because, we've seen historically that those quarterbacks that post as bad of a rookie season as Justin Fields did, 9 times out of 10, the blame is placed on the head coach, and the head coach is replaced, and probably, deservedly so. But it's a lot easier said than done saying, well, the head coach was really bad. Let's get him out of here and let's bring in a good head coach. Because please, count right now. How many good head coaches do you think exist in the NFL? 10? Like, it's not like you can just get rid of Jeff Fisher and all of a sudden, I mean, you have Sean McVay strolling through the door. That's not going to happen with Chicago. That's not going to happen with Jacksonville. We shouldn't necessarily pretend that it is. Not to mention, if we're going back to this Justin Fields situation, we can blame it on the situation 100%. I think that if Justin Fields landed in I'll tell you right now, if Trey Lance landed to Chicago in the middle of the first and we saw Justin Fields, go for 3 first-round picks to the San Francisco 49ers at pick 3, I would be on the opposite end of the spectrum. I would be saying, hell, the NFL told us Justin Fields is significantly better than Trey Lance. He has the team investment. He has a much, much better situation with a great head coach and great receiving game options. Let's take Justin Fields in Dynasty. But our job isn't, let's figure out who the most talented quarterback in a vacuum is. Our job is to figure out what quarterback is going to put up the most fantasy points. Fantasy, the key word. Fake. So this upcoming season, I can tell you, Justin Fields most likely going to disappoint people. And most people are going to say, well, look at his receiving core. It was the first year of a new head coach coming in. He was throwing to Darnell Mooney, nobody else. What was he supposed to do? I agree with you. He's set up to fail. But we shouldn't pretend that he's not set up to fail and draft him as if he's in a great situation. We should acknowledge that he's set up to fail, and we should lower him down our rankings because of so. It's not like Justin Fields went out there and stole my girlfriend or anything. If anything, I feel bad for Justin Fields. I feel bad that he was put in this situation. But at the same time, I feel bad for dynasty owners that are pretending like it didn't happen. Okay, so are we taking Leonard Fournette? Am I the old head just taking all these dusty players? Now, I feel like a clown as well because we were screaming how bad of a draft pick Leonard Fournette was not that long ago. Okay, so Girthquake decides to go. Of course, let me give a shout out to Girthquake. If y'all did not know, which everybody should, set up this studio for us and definitely is probably the number one member of the flock. And we also got JN out here in the chat. I'll read that in a second, JN. Okay, so let's go through. Let's pick out some of our options here. I'm assuming we're going Tyler Lockett. Okay, so if we're looking at our rankings right now, we have Tyler Lockett at wide receiver 42, Mike Williams at wide receiver 41, Odell Beckham Jr. at wide receiver 40. We have those 3 wide receivers back to back to back, really up to your own preference on who you're going to prefer in that range. Tight end, I believe we're going to have Cole Kmet as the best option here. I almost want to just take Cole Kmet so I don't have to deal with people going, oh my God, you didn't draft the tight end in this draft. Don't you know you have to submit your starting lineup tomorrow? Running back, I'm honestly not really intrigued with anybody. I know Rashad Penny is going to be everybody's favorite guy here. We're going to end up taking Cole Kmet just so people can think this draft board looks pretty. It is what it is. Maybe if it was real life, we would go through and we would take another wide receiver. But a big thing is why I'm passing on Rashad Penny here. And y'all know, I've loved Rashad Penny and I've been wrong on Rashad Penny every single year. In 2018, I'm all in. 2019, I'm all in. 2020, I'm not all in, but he was a free waiver wire pickup. I had him in pretty much every league. And in 2021, free waiver wire pickup, have him in pretty much every league. And Rashad Penny looked great at the end of the season. And I think Rashad Penny could actually improve in college, he was able to go out there and be a great pass catching running back. He had over 12% of his team's college target share. But the issue with Rashad Penny has never been the lack of talent, which he just proved that he has that talent profile. The issue with Rashad Penny instead has just been the inability to stay healthy. And I'm not going to be willing to say that, oh, Rashad Penny answered all those questions because what he did in the last month of the season. So, excuse me for passing on our guy Rashad Penny here. I know a lot of people probably wanted to see him be the selection, but at the same time, I can't necessarily come out here and say that Rashad Penny is just going to be able to stay healthy. Also, he doesn't have a contract this upcoming season. Okay, so Jane coming out says, my orphan with Herbert, Burrow, Najee Harris, CeeDee Lamb, the 2022 101 is likely to fold. Grew attached through trading just to make a contender 2022. I'm just sad. I'm sorry, my dude. If it folds, I promise you, you'll be the first person in a new startup. That would be very bad. And I remember you took over that team. That team was horrible too. The team you took over was very bad. The fact that you have Burrow, Herbert, Najee, and Lamb in the 101 is pretty devastating. I'm sorry about that, my friend. Okay, so a lot of people are arguing Dobbins versus Akers. I completely understand that argument, and honestly, I'm fine if you want to go either way. A big thing with Cam Akers is we actually have not seen him catch passes at the NFL level, despite him displaying that ability at Florida State. With Cam Akers also, he's a little bit younger than J.K. Dobbins. I mean, if you're pulling up our Dynasty rankings, I have Cam Akers and J.K. Dobbins in the same exact tier. I have them as our running back 6 and our running back 7. And I have Cam Akers one spot ahead of Dobbins, but it's something that I honestly think it's just your personal preference, up to you. And what's interesting is I believe we've actually seen Dobbins command more targets on a per game basis his rookie season than we've ever had from Cam Akers, despite the fact that if I was projecting those two running backs going forward, I would probably assume Cam Akers to be the running back that was able to draw targets at a higher rate out of the backfield. Now, I'm probably wrong with that assumption. I am probably being naive. But, I mean, he did such a good job of that at Florida State. And also, I mean, you should assume that Matthew Stafford, a pocket passing option, is going to be willing to check the ball down out of the backfield. Whereas with J.K. Dobbins, on the other hand, in Baltimore, playing with a mobile quarterback that doesn't necessarily need to check the ball down. He wasn't as good of a pass catcher at Ohio State. So it's interesting. Both very young running backs, same exact draft class. Cam Akers does have the more significant injury, but Cam Akers also able to come back at the end of the season, which of course you love to see. If it wasn't for Cam Akers coming back in the playoffs, even though he has looked pretty bad, but I think you can easily excuse that for him, I would have J.K. Dobbins ahead of Akers, but with Akers being able to come back and with the assumption that he gets even better as the offseason progresses and as he's able to fully go through a rehab, I think it's a strong argument that either person can go either way. Drew says they both had injuries which have a terrible history of people recovering from at that position. I'm honestly, maybe I'm naive to say this. I'm not too worried in today's age for an ACL tear for a running back. I'm not worried. Akers, on the other hand, with the torn Achilles, like I went from being way too, like 2 months ago, you pull up our Dynasty rankings, I have Cam Akers down there like running back 22 because I am so worried about that torn Achilles. Because no running back really until this year with Donta Foreman and this year with Cam Akers has ever been able to make it back from that. But now when we see him actually being able to get back on the field, I'm a lot more excited going forward. I think I just want to say I was wrong. Jayan says he also takes a vote on the Andrews over Kyle Pitts, besides Kyle Pitts going to the 202. Guys, y'all know I was a massive Kyle Pitts hater with this price point last offseason, and I'm the first person to just take my L and say I think Kyle Pitts does have to be tight end 1. Okay. I think we have a pretty easy selection here. You know, a player that I've actually been taking a lot in best ball drafts, tournament best ball drafts, so you're just looking for the highest ceiling possible, and we've been getting him at the very end of those. It's actually Rob Gronkowski. I know everybody's operating under the assumption that Gronk is going to retire this upcoming season. I think there's an outside chance. I mean, hell, if Gronk can get paid $8 million to go play somewhere, might as well. I mean, he's, 6 months older than Travis Kelce? Juju Smith-Schuster goes to the 1106. I've seen some Juju hype as of late, and you know, there's nothing more than I love than some good old Juju Smith-Schuster hype. Besides, I mean, our guy, Odell Beckham Jr., the intro of this channel. We're going to be getting him here at the 1107 with Odell Beckham Jr. No idea what the contract situation is going to look like this upcoming year. Obviously, he's not signed, but it is what it is. We'll take Odell at the 1107. And real quick, let me give a shout out to let me give a shout out to Girthquake. Leonard Fournette at the 1005, probably the best value in this draft. And I was screaming Fournette was a horrible pick not that long ago. I mean, whenever you were seeing Leonard Fournette go in the 5th round. But to get Leonard Fournette after James Robinson, after James Cook of all running backs, fantastic, fantastic value. Yeah, Jayan says Gronk said he wants to play with Burrow. I saw that he said he liked Burrow. I don't know if he actually is willing to go to Cincinnati. Would be interesting, though. And real quick, thank you so much for everybody who's gone down there and dropped a like on this live stream. I believe we have almost more likes on the live stream than viewers. So definitely over half the people watching right now have dropped a like, and I truly do appreciate that. Jayan says Burrow is the Brady 2.0. My friend, I will bet any amount of money on the planet that Joe Burrow does not come close to Tom Brady's career. That is just ridiculous to say. Okay, so Rashad Penny goes the 11-10, completely fine. Taking Rashad Penny here if you want to take Rashad Penny here. Just personally, I'm not going to be taking him at the 10-06 over someone like Cole Kmet in a tight end premium format, just centered around that injury history that we have. Okay, so let's see where we go at the 11-12 turn. Steven wants us to go Kyron Williams. With Kyron Williams, it is nice. He does check a lot of boxes. I just have such a hard time with those running backs that are projected to go a little bit later until we see the official size and the official testing measurables. Because, I mean, if you're looking at those running backs with their height, weight right now, it's literally just what the school list. I mean, every single year, those running backs will come and they'll be smaller than they're actually listed as. And at the same time, we don't know what that 40-yard dash time is going to be. And I really do care about that at the running back position. I mean, we've gone through and with our Dynasty rookie draft guides, we've shown, I mean, in-depth research on why it actually does matter. Now, Robert Woods going at the 11-11. Love that draft pick of Robert Woods. The question with Robert Woods is he did get that injury a little bit later on in the year. And I think you have to begin to worry more about ACL tears for a wide receiver that's that age as Robert Woods compared to someone like J.K. Dobbins who had it before the season and is very young. So I would be a little bit more worried. Okay, so Jan says, Mason, you clearly forgot 2019. Yeah, I did get to see Joe Burrow play in person in 2019 with Jamar Chase, with Justin Jefferson, with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I got to see that. No big deal. No big deal. We actually got to see them play their closest game of the season. They almost lost, but sadly they did not. Okay, so you get Alexander Madison going at the 12-02. I really like the Joshua Palmer pick as well. What's interesting is you've seen that in best ball leagues in particular, in redraft best ball formats, Joshua Palmer is going pretty damn high. And obviously it's with the assumption that Mike Williams is a free agent, Jalen Guyton's a free agent, maybe Joshua Palmer's the wide receiver 2 for the Los Angeles Chargers this upcoming season. I am fine with this investment in Dynasty. I'm going to be less excited about it in a redraft, however, because if you're talking about a redraft format, then we don't even know is, say, Mike Williams does decide to walk. What happens if they go, you know what, we're not going to pay Mike Williams, not a great fit with Justin Herbert, and then we'll save the money on Mike Williams. Let's go sign Chris Godwin. Let's go sign Allen Robinson. Let's go draft Treylon Burks. I mean, there is the outside chance that they go grab another wide receiver, which I think is completely reasonable to expect. Okay, so Stevenson at the 12-04. Great pick with Ramondre Stevenson. I prefer the Stevenson, Alexander Madison, Joshua Palmer players over Russell Gage. And the Russell Gage free agent this upcoming season. Maybe he goes back to Atlanta. Calvin Ridley leaves. Yada, yada, yada. There's a lot uncertain there. Okay, so I kind of want to make a statement pick just so I can talk about him. Actually, no. There's one player that's by far and away the best guy on the board. Okay, so let's see where Girthquake decides to go. He's sniped us before. He doesn't do it this time. He takes Terrace Marshall. Instead, we're going to be going Irv Smith Jr. You look at Irv Smith Jr. back what he did in 2020. I mean, a very young tight end, drafted at 20 years old coming out of Alabama. I mean, he's never really played without Kyle Rudolph on the field. I know reports last offseason were saying that Tyler Conklin was going to have a role regardless. I mean, but still, at the same time, an incredibly young tight end that should be able to easily come back from that injury. Very similar to J.K. Dobbins. That injury was suffered before the season started, so I'm not worried about the timetable in the slightest. I mean, I view Irv Smith Jr., Cole Kmet almost as the same exact options. Okay, so Christopher says, where would you rank David Njoku if you went to the Chargers in free agency? Love David Njoku. If you would have asked me back in 2017 who would be the tight end 1 overall in Dynasty, I would say David Njoku. I mean, trust me, there was a ton of hype for him back there, just like O.J. Howard. But I don't want to get too excited. Still an incredibly young tight end, very similar to Irv Smith Jr., drafted at 20 years old, big, elite athleticism. His second year as well, he was actually really good, dealt with way too many coaching staffs, dealt with a different general manager that clearly didn't have really plans for David Njoku. Never got a fair shot in Cleveland. It does have a lot of upside. I don't want to all of a sudden just go pure hype, though, and then project him over someone like Irv Smith Jr. I think Irv Smith Jr. I definitely prefer over Njoku. Okay, so Celtics says, hey, Mason, for someone like Adams who you evaluate 2 to 3 more years of elite production versus A.J. Brown, who has more of a limited ceiling but has more long-term value. So a big thing is, as we've already discussed, let me show y'all this entire draft board. And of course, thank you so much for everybody who came out to the live stream and hung out with us. And if you have not already, subscribe to the channel, drop a like. But a big thing is, if you're looking at a player like Davante Adams, I think that he is a great value at the 311 here. But we've discussed the same thing with Cooper Kupp. All these wide receivers, I believe, are ranked neck and neck in our Dynasty rankings. If you pull up our Dynasty rankings, I have A.J. Brown as the wide receiver 3. I have Cooper Kupp as the wide receiver 4, Tyreek Hill wide receiver 5, Davante Adams wide receiver 6. They're all in that same exact range. I'm just a little bit hesitant to go and take that veteran player at that second pick overall when we have Jamar Chase, a 22-year-old wide receiver option to start us off, because as I've said, I would prefer the flexibility to possibly take the team into a productive struggle mode a little bit later on in the draft. Whereas if we take a player like Cooper Kupp, Davante Adams, we lock ourselves into a win now build, which this team ended up being a little bit of a combination of both, probably leaning a little bit closer to win now. But of course, we would make those adequate trades by the time we got to the season. And of course, thank you so much for everybody who hung out with us in this live stream. Really hope y'all enjoyed it. Really hope that you have a great day. And please, everyone, have a ton of fun at the Super Bowl tomorrow.